Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third workshop of four on sustainable food tourism. And today we're going to be talking about identifying and making practical changes in your business. Today I'm joined by my colleague Sandra Reid. I am the Chief Executive of Green Tourism, and I've been working in sustainable tourism now for over 25 years. Sandra, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name's Sandra Reid, and I'm the Director of Fair Consulting, and I work to support food and drink businesses and hospitality businesses with their strategies. So, wanted to have a little recap of what we're going to look at today and what we've looked at already in the earlier workshops. So, today's workshop, we're going to recap from workshops 1 and 2. And then we're going to go on to talk about our impact on the planet and what we can do about it, and specifically looking at climate action plans. We're going to look at some low cost improvements that you might be able to make. And in reference to that, looking at some resource efficient case studies and best practice. Then I'm going to be talking about food waste and what we can do about that. And last but not least, we're going to give you some homework so that you can put all of this to good use. So in workshop 1, and I hope you were able to join us on that, we looked at what is food tourism, and we looked at some examples of that. Then Andrea spoke about sustainability and our impact on the planet, and specifically sustainable tourism, which is what all your businesses are involved in. We looked at the circular economy in Scotland, and again, we like to bring in case studies and examples so that you can reference good practice. We gave some quick wins and some advice, and we gave some tips on undertaking a baseline review. We gave references and top tips to getting started on your sustainability journey. Then we went on to workshop 2, and this was specifically looking at how we interact with our customers and how our customers can support our sustainability journey. So we looked at some changes over the last couple of years in customer behaviour. We looked at travel trends and we looked at food and drink trends. And then we referenced that back to the green recovery. In terms of your sustainability journey, we looked at how you could meet your customer expectations and some of the activities that you could get involved in terms of campaigns and sharing your green story to meet those customer expectations and really engage with them to go along with you on your journey. And lastly, we looked at top tips for social media, for marketing your green story, and for engaging with those very important customers.
Thanks, Sandra. I hope you were all able to join us on those webinars. If not, they are going to be posted on the One Opportunity Northeast website because they were all filmed, so you can go back and have a look at them. I wanted to start today's session sort of looking at slightly the bigger picture and why it's important to be looking at resource efficiency and you know the science behind it. And I thought this was a very informative slide in terms of the global picture, and you may have heard of the Paris Agreement, which was agreed in at COP21 in 2015. And at that point, the climate scientists have been looking over many years around the impact of the increase of the temperature of the atmosphere of the Earth based on pre-industrial levels and how much it's increased. And they've been looking at two levels, an increase of 1.5 degree or an increase of 2 degrees. And what they saw was there was a significant difference between the 1.5 degree increase and 2 degrees. And as you can see, the top two slides show what it would be like on the hottest day of the world. If it was 1.5 on the left and 2 degrees on the right, as you can see, there is significant heating, especially around the, as you expect, around the equator, but even into northern areas, it's significant increases. And these slides below show what the temperature would be like in the coldest nights. And I think quite telling is showing how much the temperature is increasing in the Arctic and Antarctic, which obviously where we have ice reserves and there's potential of ice melting. And what they've identified is that at 2 degrees increase, a significant number of people in the world are going to be exposed to severe heat waves at least once every 5 years. And we have seen the consequence of that in Europe, where a lot of people in recent years have actually died because of heat waves. But it's significant impact on biodiversity, which also then impacts on things like pollinators and our crops and growing food. So significant numbers of insects, plants, animals being affected in their climatic range by global change. And as I mentioned, that sea rise level, I mean, if you are a coastal business, you look out your window now and imagine what it would look like with the sea 6 foot higher, permanently 6 foot higher than it is currently, regardless of tides. If you are interested in finding out more about that, the IPCC report was recently launched a couple of weeks ago, the latest one, and that has more stats and information, more doom and gloom, unfortunately, but also some suggestions on how we can affect and change that. And one of the things that you probably ought to be thinking about within your own business is adaptation for climate change. So in Scotland, the top 10 warmest years have actually been since 1997, and that's records even starting back in 1884. So we have seen significant increase of temperature in Scotland, and that's across all seasons, not just in the summer. More rare variable weather, typically warmer and drier summers, and you think, well, that's fantastic, but actually, is that going to affect the building fabric? If you've got flat roofs with material on it that could be affected by being dried out or being too hot, is that something where you might need to consider putting air conditioning in for your guests because it's actually too hot for them? Typically milder and wetter winters, so maybe less snow, but actually a lot more flooding, intensive rainfall, and sea level rise I've mentioned. And also, if you're a business that's very dependent on people coming during the winter for skiing or for snow or for tobogganing or ice skating, if we don't have the snow, then that's going to seriously affect your business. So I think it's something that we should all be thinking about, especially in a business situation, of what the impact of temperature increases is going to be on your building fabric, what new appliances you might need to bring in, how it might affect your staff getting to and from work, or working conditions within the business, whether it's whether it's too hot for them, your customers, and obviously your grounds, which you might be very dependent on for your customers coming. The example here of climate change assessment, if you look at Adaptation Scotland's website, they've got some great advice on how to undertake a climate risk assessment. This is one of our members in the southwest. They're just on the edge of the Severn River, so they have a lot of problems with flooding, but they've done a really nice looking climate risk assessment. This is on their website. It's clear for their guests and their other stakeholders to understand, and they've identified what the impact could be of climate change, but what they could do to try and mitigate it. So I think that's something that we all need to be thinking about. Adaptation is a key part of that. And one of the topics that people are talking about a lot at the moment is net zero. So we know that the government has got net zero targets. The UK government has net zero by 2050. Scotland's net zero targets are 2045. If you're in Edinburgh city targets are 2030, so which is only 8 years down the road. So it is something we all need to be thinking about. And I thought it was just useful to give you an explanation as to what net zero actually means. It is about your carbon emissions and scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. Scope 1 and 2 are the energy that you use on site. So whether the gas you're burning is a scope 1, coal, that kind of thing you're burning to create energy or heat on site. Scope 2 is any emissions related to energy you buy in. So what your electricity supplier is using in terms of creating the energy, the electricity to send you. And scope 3, which is in hospitality and tourism, can be something like 80% of your carbon emissions can be scope 3, are actually those emissions from sources that are probably out with your control. So they're your customers' travel, they're your suppliers' travel, bringing your food or your laundry to your business. It's business travel that you're doing away from site. It's a wide range. We've got more information if people are more interested in finding out about the scopes, but I'm not going to go into more detail today on that. What we want to concentrate on is those practical changes. You can calculate your emissions if you've got the data And there is conversion factors on the government's website. There's a link there. So you basically take your total energy consumption and time it by the emission factor to actually work out what your carbon emissions are. And carbon offsetting is something that's been talked more and more about because it is seen as part of the solution, especially for scope 3. And the Forestry and Land in Scotland have a great website information on their carbon offset partnerships, which might be useful to look at. And there are lots of other places that you can go and get support and advice on resource efficiency in particular, but also net zero. So Visit Scotland have a whole page on supporting responsible businesses in responsible tourism. They've got links there to some funding and advice. There's a great website, the Scottish Government's website, which is findbusinesssupport.gov.scot. And if you go to that rather long URL there, you will find a page that you can put in that you want advice on efficiency or net zero. You can put in your location and it will bring up a set of information about funding. So I did this yesterday. So on net zero, there's 74 different entries on advice and funding support for net zero. Just so that you're aware, you will get copies of the slides. And as I said, we're recording this, so you can go back and look and pick up those URLs later. Zero Waste Scotland has a lot of information. We've mentioned that them considerably in other webinars we've done. A lot of information about resource efficiency, but they've also got information on a net zero plan that you can create. It's interesting, the Business Efficiency Scotland service, which up until now Zero Waste Scotland has been hosting, will be changing on the 1st of April to the Energy Savings Trust. So this is the service that provides you with free advice. You can get audits of your business, and they can provide you with plans and actions on how to improve. And they can also help provide with funding for capital expenditure of energy efficiency equipment. So that will be changing on the 1st of April. So keep an eye out, and then you'll be going to the Energy Saving website to look for information. And NetRegs is a great place about all legislation, but in particular, they do have a section on carbon reduction and efficiency. So there's lots of support out there for you, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up on that. So as I said, the global situation is important, and we need to all be thinking about our carbon emissions and how we reduce them. Climate action plans are something that businesses are being encouraged to do more and more. And there is an organisation called Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency. Visit Scotland was the first national tourism agency to sign up to this. And it's an international initiative. Again, it has a lot of resources on its site, and it helps you understand what should be in your action plan and sharing your commitment. We have a toolkit on our website. So the link at the bottom there is to the page on our website where you can download a template if you want to declare a climate emergency, and it gives you information on what you're signing up to. But we've also got a copy of our own climate plan, so you can actually have a look at that and see how that could be something you might want to do for your own business. Resource efficiency is not just about carbon, though. It is about all types of resources, and that includes natural resources, what comes out of the ground, but it also includes human resources, so how you manage your team, how you train your team, how you get them involved, and capital expenditure is a big part of that as well. And resources, some of them are very finite. What you dig out of the ground can't be replaced, and the demand for resources is expected to grow as we have more and more technology, more and more different phones and all these kind of appliances. Those increase on resources is significantly going to increase. And they are, as I said, they are limited. There are increased demand, and in some ways we're looking for technology to help us solve some of the problems around global change, and that will be for our future. And the benefits of cost efficiency are significant. The big one being obviously reducing your own costs and running efficiencies, reducing the pressure on the planet, reducing your emissions, and improved output from equipment, and also can help with being more efficient within your business and having a team that's more organized and therefore happier in their work. And there's some big savings that can be made in terms of resource efficiency. So the practical steps that we suggest in terms of looking at is you really need to identify what you currently use. And we can't emphasize this enough. We had in the first webinar, we talked about doing a baseline review. You really need to understand what you're using before you can actually start changing it or reducing it. So identifying what you're using, reviewing it, making notes of what you've got already, could you reduce it? And then creating an action plan and how you can develop to reduce the resources and improve the way that you do things. And again, there are some significant changes that can be made in terms of what we can do to reduce our use of resources. Some stats there, and there's also a couple of websites there that have information. That's WRAP, which is the UK Initiative for Waste Reduction. So there's some very practical things. In terms of what areas to look at, these are the obvious ones. So in energy, you need to be looking at your at your energy use. So that's, looking at your bills, looking at what's you're actually using, looking at your lighting. You might do a lighting survey to find out what kind of lamps you've got on site, and how many of them are still old tungstens, or if you're still using compact fluorescents, both of which can be replaced by much more efficient LED versions. Looking at your appliances, are they A rated or A plus rated? Are they at a point where they're becoming so inefficient they're actually costing you too much money to run? Should you be looking to replace them? Heating and hot water, can you turn things down a little bit? And also that building fabric and insulation, as I said, could be something you might want to look at even more closely as potentially temperatures start to increase. And again, there's information there. As I mentioned, the business efficiency support will move to the Energy Saving Trust, but there are funding and there is loans available out there for putting in efficiency measures. Water, again, very similar. If you're on a water meter, this is much easier because you will get bills and it will tell you how much water you're using. But it's really useful to monitor water because you do start to identify when you've got a leak, or when people are leaving taps on longer than they should be. We might be looking at putting in aerators. So this picture here is from Save Money Carbon, which is a great online company that sells equipment, the energy efficient equipment, but they've got some great little calculators. So they can tell you, if I buy this aerator for all my taps, how much money I'm actually going to save, and how long is the payback going to be. So those are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. Water conservation, again, it's, are you using water that comes, free water off your roof? Have you got water butts that you can water your hanging baskets? Are you looking at where you can, reduce the amount of water by using appliances that have recycle systems in them, like dishwashers? And recovery, reuse, again, as I mentioned, the dishwashers where they recover and reuse that water. And also looking at water quality. I'm not quite sure if you can see what that picture is in the bottom there, but that's actually a fatberg. It's the fatberg that was found underneath St Andrews, and it weighs the same as 28 adult elephants. And this fatberg is because people are washing down the sink organic material, and in particular fat, from their fryers or from cooking and things like that, and even fat from washing and things like that. But this shows the impact we can have, and that's cost many thousands of pounds to remove that. But it's something that we need to be aware of. So water quality is an important thing. On the waste side of things, I've got a diagram there of the waste hierarchy. It's probably a bit small for you to read, but the waste hierarchy, was very much about avoiding waste and then looking at where you could reuse. If you can't reuse it, then potentially recycle or recover it. So that, break it down into its component parts and reuse the different parts. And then hopefully, that's the majority of it is used, and what's left over might go to landfill. But we are looking at more of a circular economy now, because we are finding that there are markets for waste, and some person's waste may actually be somebody else's treasure. So I think there's opportunities to think about any waste that you've got, what's in your bin, and thinking about, how can I avoid having it? How can I reduce it? Recycling, but actually, could it be passed on to somebody else for use in their production, their manufacturing? Looking at single-use items, I mean, plastic is one that's talked about a lot, but legislation is changing so that single-use plastics will be illegal. But we are looking at other single-use items as well. Do you really need, all those bits and bobs in the hotel room? Do you really need to look at single-use items as something that can be rewashed or reused? Organic waste obviously reflects mainly sort of ground waste. So, you know, have you got a composter? You know, are you avoiding that going into landfill where it could potentially, you know, generate methane, which is one of the most damaging greenhouse gases. So we need to think about that. And then special and hazardous waste, you know, is that you like bulbs and chemicals. So again, there's lots of information out there on websites to show you what you can do. And food waste, and Sandra's going to talk more about food waste in particular, it is a big issue. As I said, organic material, when it goes into landfill, does create methane. So it's been legally, you know, an obligation not to put food waste into landfill. And if you are a tourism or hospitality business, you're expected, unless you're in a rural area where there's you know, difficulties, challenges, you are expected to have it collected. And what you should be doing really is looking at what's in your food waste. You know, are you putting too much on the plate? Is it always the salad that gets left? You know, do people really want a bread roll as well as the chips and everything else? You know, can you change your portion control? Can you change your menu so you offer side dishes separately? And there is a government target to reduce food waste by 33% by 2025. That's 3 years. So hopefully they're on track for that. Staff training really important when it comes to food waste, and getting them involved to identify what the food waste is in the first place when they're scraping the plates. What is the main thing they're scraping off? Is that something that the chef shouldn't be putting on the plate in the first place? And again, Zero Waste Scotland do have some excellent information about food waste. They've got a great food waste guide. It's a PDF you can download. The URL was too long to put on the page, but if you go to Zero Waste Scotland's website and just type in food waste guide, you'll find it. Again, it's very, very useful. I just wanted to mention behavioural change, and I think we underestimate how much behavioural change is an important part of anything that we do in our business. I'm sure if you've tried to introduce new processes, new procedures, you know that people can be resistant to change. So I think it's actually behavioural change is a key part of your success of your efficiency plan, and it, you know, you need to identify behaviours you want to change. Understand it can take several weeks, if not months, for people to want to or to take on board those new changes, and explaining why they're needed, I think, is really important. Leading from the top and then rewarding and share is something that people will respond to and hopefully engage with it. And that encouragement and influencing, you know, whether you're offering some kind of bonus or some kind of special day out if the team reach their targets, and sticking at it, I think is a key part of it. So I just wanted to mention behavioural change as being something we shouldn't underestimate. It's not just a case of saying we're going to do this. It's actually, we've got to bring everybody with us. I'm going to hand over to Sandra now. She's going to go through some case studies.
Thank you, Andrea. I think some absolutely valuable information there and lots of links. So I urge you all to take a look at those. So first of all, I wanted to have a word about involving your customers, because as well as your premises, your staff and your processes that Andrea has spoken about, customers are also a significant contributor to your environmental footprint. And just as they contribute to this, they can also help you to be more efficient in managing your resources. And just as you want to be more sustainable, generally, so will they. So what are some of the benefits of involving your customers in your sustainability journey? So first of all, it can engage. If you're engaging with your customer, you've got a relationship with them. You're building that relationship and you're improving their loyalty to you as a business. It can also help you with product development, as their feedback will give you an insight into what their customer needs are, what they might prefer to do, how they might prefer you to operate your business. It can also help you to reduce costs, which is always a benefit to business. So a couple of specific examples here from businesses in the Northeast. Encouraging your customers to subscribe to products can really reduce your packaging and their waste. So Joe's Healthy Cupboard, which is a subscription business, and one of the products that they offer is nut milk, and that's not a typo. That is MYLK milk, and they're making deliveries more efficient and packaging more sustainable, and these lovely returnable bottles that they offer in their subscription service. Another idea is on returnable packaging is something similar to the Rock Rose, who had a very distinctive, beautiful ceramic bottle, but this product is now available in pouches. So you use the pouch to refill your gin bottle, and then you return the packaging. So all round, very much that circular economy that Andrea was talking about, and really both beautiful products here. So Andrea spoke earlier about resource efficiency and how we can manage this. And I think there's nothing better than looking at case studies to learn from real live businesses who are out there doing it. So Andrea spoke about how we could monitor energy use, what we could do with lighting, what we can do with appliances, heating, hot water, and building fabric and insulation. And here's a business here that's tapped into all of these things. Comrie Croft is a lovely business in Perthshire. It has accommodation provision. It's a wedding venue. They have a farm shop and they have a cafe. So lots of businesses using lots of parts of the business using lots of energy. So how did they address managing their energy use? First of all, they have LED lights throughout, so they're making distinctive savings there. They have what's called a district heating system, which redistributes heat efficiently through the building from one central source. They have 60 solar panels generating energy, generating light, and they have a biomass boiler system, a Hargassner system. So all great initiatives to be able to save their energy. They have underfloor heating in the reception area, so guests are getting that warm feeling as soon as they're going, without the impact on bills and on the planet. So I think one of the significant things around behavioural change that Comrie Croft did was to work with their staff to make sure that they were always aware of the implications of what happens if I turn this light on, what happens if I leave this light on, what happens if I turn the cooker on first thing in the morning just to heat up the kitchen. So remember what Andrea said about changing habits. It takes time, it needs reinforcement, but this is a business that is really reaping the benefits of that. Customers also, lots of information in terms of signage, posters, information in guest rooms, and briefings for guests to let them know about the sustainability initiatives that are in place and how they themselves are helping to save energy. So on to water now. Another of our precious resources, and businesses need to have very good practices in place in terms of monitoring water use, recovering water, and ensuring where possible that water is of the very best quality. So without those horrible fatbergs that Andrea was talking about. Heritage Portfolio Limited are the caterers at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And obviously this particular client is very switched on in terms of delivering a sustainable catering service and relaying that message to their customers. So when the kitchens at the Botanic Gardens were being upgraded a few years ago, they took very seriously their choice of equipment in terms of energy ratings, which Andrea referred to earlier. So for water, when choosing their dishwashers, they selected water saving equipment. So this is done by a smaller tank size, which uses up to 30% less water. So lots of information out there from manufacturers and equipment suppliers if that's something that you're interested in. Another very simple and effective thing to do is to have sensor taps or motion detector taps rather than taps that you turn on and leave. So that it manages the water flow. And linked to that, again, this behavioural change. So working with the staff to say, don't leave that tap running, which is a very common practice in kitchens. So really looking at encouraging chefs not to leave taps running and to be conscious of the water that they were using in washing materials and washing fruit and veg, and just being careful about what they were using. And in terms of the building itself, there was an exercise undertaken to ensure pipes and tanks were properly lagged to make sure that water and energy were being saved. And next of all, looking at waste reduction, and some really interesting case studies here, I hope you'll agree. So North Point Distillery at Caithness, so they have their building was built using natural and sustainable materials, but they have a policy on site of no single-use plastics, so absolutely nothing at all in terms of the processes, in terms of their product. All their waste goes to biomass, and the business it's new business and taking on board all sustainability principles in terms of their build and their operation going forward. We spoke about Lochleven Larder at an earlier workshop. This is a lovely business based in Kinlochleven, and they have a great approach to driving sustainability. So there's more about that in the earlier workshop if you want to look them up. But I was specifically looking here at their shop and their cafe. So in their shop, there are no single-use plastics. Reusable bags are the order of the day. And for all of the business, including their cafe and their food waste, they have recycling in place. They have recycling in place for glass, cans, cardboard, and paper also. And once again, looking at that staff side of things, staff awareness, they have a very, very switched on team, and everybody is watching and taking care of that sustainability piece. Over in the west of Scotland, Lochfine Oysters in Argyll, they're planning to install an eco-digester and biomass boiler, which is going to reduce their waste sent to landfill by 50%. So that's a massive reduction, I think you'll agree. And working on the basis that they were already recycling many of their materials in their own business, they looked to the community and they said, how can we help the community here? And so they've extended their own in-house recycling facilities to the community and benefiting the wider population there. So this particular case study is about food waste, and this is a great example of a business that received support from Zero Waste Scotland to help them reduce their food waste levels. So Livingston Larder Cook School is a training centre offering practical cookery courses for a variety of groups and a variety of ages. So it could be for team building, or they could be working with schools groups. But they had a number of challenges. They had particularly aging equipment, and their storage facilities weren't great at all. And they also were experiencing rising food costs. And I think this is a challenge that we're all experiencing at the moment. And their biggest problem, high levels of food waste. So they approached Zero Waste Scotland, and they received both funding and practical support from Zero Waste. And on the equipment side of things, they were able to install much more energy efficient fridges and freezers. So with that rating that Andrea was speaking about, and also greater capacity for food storage. Looking at training, the teams on site had training to help them change the ways they worked around food preparation. So menu planning, looking at planning menus, how to best make use of the food that had been delivered that day, making use of all foods so that there were no leftovers, and also looking at portion size. Are our portions too big? Are there things left on the plate at the end of the day? And so really looking at that staff training and staff engagement piece so that we understand absolutely what goes onto the plate is eaten. Another equipment initiative was the introduction of vacuum packing equipment, and that extended food shelf life and better preserved their products. So all round, this was a great piece of work between Zero Waste Scotland and the Cook School. So that was a food waste case study, and I wanted to just take a look at specifically at food waste, and just as with all of the things that we're talking about in these workshops, it's very important to understand where you are now. So you need to understand the volumes of waste that you are generating. And the simplest, and maybe not the nicest, but the simplest way to do this is to weigh your waste for at least a week, ideally 2, but at least a week. And look at your waste in terms of what's production waste. So what's left in terms of things like vegetable trimmings, bones, also plate waste. What's the customer leaving on the plate, and what can you do about that? And lastly, spoilage. So thinking back to the Larder Cook School, they had some spoilage because food was going off. They addressed that through the vacuum packing machine. So first of all, production waste. And what I'm talking about here is things like vegetable trimmings. Do you actually need to trim those vegetables? Could you just wash them? Meat and fish bones. Traditionally, not much you can do with those. Tea bags, coffee grounds. So taking the last one first, coffee grounds make absolutely fantastic fertilizer. So bag them up in recyclable bags and allow your customers to help themselves to these bags of coffee grounds to put in their garden. Or perhaps you have your own garden or your own allotment. Vegetable trimmings, if you must take them off, they can nearly always be used in soup, in stocks. Again, meat bones, fish bones, these can be used in stocks. Fish offcuts can be used to make pate. And, really it's about looking at your menu. So I do a lot of work with businesses to develop menus, and we talk about using local foods, and we talk about balance in the menu, but it's just as important to think about your menu in terms of, am I going to have food waste here? Nose to tail cooking is something that I'm absolutely passionate about. So that's using the whole beast. So looking at beef, for example, it's not just about the prime cuts. It's not just about the fillet steaks. It's about everything. It's about using every single piece of the animal, because we're giving respect to the animal in that way. So lots to think about there in terms of production waste. So spoilage. This is part of food waste that it's absolutely avoidable, and it's can be managed through great kitchen management practices. So first of all, don't overorder. Only order what you need. Control your stock. Make sure you know what's in your fridges, what's in your cupboards, and make sure that you're using a first in, first out system so that you're managing that stock. And lastly, looking at menu planning. The days of great, big, extensive menus are long gone. We need to look at small, tight, seasonal menus and managing spoilage in that way. You should not have spoilage in your business. Now, plate waste. You might think that that's out of your control because it's what the customer leaves on the plate. But if you have plate waste on a regular basis, your portions are probably too big, or you're giving the customer something that they really don't want to eat. Commonly, as Andrea mentioned earlier, garnishes are quite often left, particularly when you're dealing with perhaps children. Don't give a child a garnish; they probably won't eat it. Ask your customer, would you like salad with that? It can be an upsell. A side dish, a side vegetable dish, a side salad is an upsell to your business. And it's actually a good indicator of what your customers are preferring to eat and drink. And it can inform your menu planning going forward. So food waste is not a negative in your business. It can really help you manage your business more efficiently and make your business more commercially successful. But just to go back to the first thing that I said, you must measure what you have in place, because if you don't measure it, you really can't manage it.
Great, thanks, Sandra. Some great examples there of businesses across Scotland, and some great tips at the end around food waste, which is an issue. I just wanted to, just we come to the end of the webinar, just mention the action plans that I introduced to you in webinar 1. We have a series of checklists that allow you to start doing that kind of baseline review and start developing a plan on what you're currently already doing, what you could potentially do, what's in planning, and those areas where you really need to focus because there's a big cost, excuse me, or a big waste. So these checklists are available through Opportunity Northeast, and I'm going to give you the contact at the end so you can get in touch with them and get these checklists to start use them. Involve your team, provide them to all areas of your business so they can all contribute. Make sure you record what you're doing. Identify those quick wins. Again, we talked about the quick wins in webinar 1. So what are you doing, that what could you do that was not going to cost a lot of money, not going to take a lot of time, but could have significant impacts and help you start your green journey. And again, highlighting where you need help and support. And as I mentioned on that slide earlier, there is a lot out there. And if you're struggling to find the right person or the right organisation to talk to, please come back and talk to Green Tourism. We're here to help. And just on that, just some last simple kind of quick top tips, simple things like turn thermostat down, saves quite a lot of energy. There's fridge and freezers, that's sort of like the ideal temperature for your domestic fridge. Switching to LED lights, we've talked about that. And there are lots of eco products out there. Now, the eco egg is a popular one, particularly if you've got domestic dryers. You can use the eco egg in your drying machine. You shouldn't have to use a softening product, because this works by banging together and will actually produce a washing that is as if you've got a softener in it. And actually reduces the drying time significantly. So there are eco products out there. Think about a policy of going paper free. Do you need to be printing out everything? Make sure you've got clear signs for everybody, your staff and your customers, and other people that you're working with. And making sure you promote or sign up for apps. There are quite a lot out there. This one's called Too Good To Go. It's a great app. So if you do have a cafe or a restaurant and you've got food that is going to go out of date or you can't use by the end of the day, then you can, if on the Too Good To Go app, you can actually promote a kind of last minute kind of discount on your products. And that's, a lot of people use that, and then can come along and get the cakes that are going to go to waste, or the last sort of sandwiches that you can't get rid of at the end of the day. So there are lots of help and support out there, and I hope you found this session useful. In terms of homework, it would be great if you could get hold of those checklists, or even if you haven't got the checklists, you can actually start thinking about what are you doing in your own business around energy saving, water, waste reduction, food waste. So thinking through some of those great tips that Sandra talked about, food waste, looking in your bins, what is actually in there? Should it be in there? Is there anything I could do to reduce it? I think that'd be a great way to start. And as I said, we're here to help if you need any help. Just as a summary, the 4 workshops that we're doing for Opportunity Northeast, which is funded by the Scottish Government's Northeast Economic Recovery Skills Fund, we have Sustainable Food Tourism Experience First Steps, Customer Expectations and Communications. This one is about identifying practical changes, and the last one will be developing a sustainability strategy. If you've got any questions and you want to find out more, please get in touch with me through our inquiries email, or for any of the materials, checklists, or any other support that you need, or queries around the project, please contact Elizabeth Mathy at Opportunity Northeast, and that's her email address. And thank you very much, and thank you, Sandra. It was a great session, and looking forward to the next one.
Breathe.
Wait a minute. I've got to turn off the recording. It won't let me stop the recording.